right, everybody, welcome into the Two for Talking podcast. I am your host, Corey Tusick. I've got the great Josh Yohe and the great Joe Bartnick. They are the two Penguin aficionados here. Both take deep dives into it, way deeper than the average fan. For Joe and Josh, obviously with the Athletic. So yeah, this is the first time we're doing this, guys. What do you think?
Well, very interesting timing. I think the whole city was very excited about the Pittsburgh Penguins suddenly in the last 2 weeks. And then the Boston Bruins came to town on Saturday night. Not only did they do some damage, Joe, but every time I looked at the out-of-town scoreboard, I thought, oh, geez, this isn't good. And what's going on in Washington? What's going on in Toronto? What's going on here? It was something of a disaster for the Penguins. How was your blood pressure, Joe, during Saturday evening? I feel like it may not have been very good.
It was the equivalent of the 1929 stock crash as far as looking up at the board. And I had made such a lovely day of it. I had a fun set Friday night at the Laugh Factory in Long Beach. I'm like, you know what? I'm taking Saturday off and I'm just going to enjoy hockey all day. And it just unwound into just being horrible. I mean, at least my mistress team, the Kings, won last against the Duckies, which was very much like a whatever. But for that split, I never thought we were going to win yesterday. I thought that was the one we were going to lose no matter what. Right. But then when DOC Drew O'Connor just made you jump out of your seat, you thought, could this really be happening? And it wasn't meant to be. But I just want to thank Corey for putting us together. Josh, I've loved your work for years, and I'm just happy to be a part of this. I mean, I'm just a dick joke guy who does some soft dumps on TV. So this is just a big thrill for me to talk Pens. But, it just, I'm just so happy that no matter what, they gave us 2 more weeks. I'd have to have a month of crying on DVE once a week, and, and you didn't have to have a month, Josh, going in to a funeral home, basically.
No, that's right. And no, I'm very excited about this opportunity as well. I'm a big fan of your work. I know you live in Los Angeles now, but I know your heart is in Western Pennsylvania at all times. You all should know, Joe woke up on the morning of February 18th and he said, you know what? I need to be there when number 68 goes to the rafters. So he's like got on a flight at 6 a.m. or whatever it was and made his way to PPG Paints Arena. The man bleeds black and gold. And it's been a crazy couple of weeks. I never think the Penguins are going to beat the Bruins when they play because I've covered dozens of games against the Boston Bruins. They are the Penguins' kryptonite. But what I didn't really expect was for the Penguins to get absolutely no help around the league. I guess they were due for one of those. It was like they'd hit blackjack 10 times in a row. You knew they were going to bust one of these times. Your luck does run out eventually. And now let's be honest, they're in trouble. You would have taken this scenario 3 weeks ago because they still have a chance. But boy, everybody was excited about 36 hours ago, and it feels a little different right now, doesn't it?
And what was the atmosphere like in the building too?
Oh, well, you mentioned DOC's goal. And by the way, if the Penguins had come back and won that game, in all seriousness, that goal would have gone down in lore as one of the great Penguins goals ever. I mean, that was an unbelievable goal. And the place, went absolutely insane. I think it was even louder than when Carlson beat the Red Wings in overtime 2 nights earlier. I mean, the place went bonkers, and you could feel they had this momentum. And I kept thinking to myself, I think they're going to draw a penalty, and maybe, I know their power play stinks, but maybe they're going to get a chance to tie this game. You could feel it coming, and then all of a sudden disaster struck one more time, and it was not to be. But I got to say, guys, it has been fun in the last couple of weeks just to be in the building around games that actually matter, because I didn't think I was going to cover a game that was going to matter for quite some time. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is like the playoff atmosphere. This is pretty cool.
I mean, if anything will bring me back to the Lord, it's this Penguin team because I was in Rome 2 weeks ago, and every church I went to, I prayed for, my family and my friends and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then literally we beat we beat the Rangers, miracle. The Devils, absolute miracle. I'm staying up till 4 a.m. Rome time, getting no sleep, just in a haze, listening to these games. So, it just Mearsy saving my, just listen to Steve Mears. It was fantastic. But, all good things are going to be coming to an end. Maybe I have a little bit of hope. I mean, let's face it, fellas. The only thing I just care about is that the Philadelphia doesn't make it. That's all I really care about.
Well, Philadelphia and Washington, I think most Penguins fans could survive, if Detroit got in. Nobody wants to see the Flyers and Capitals make it, I'm sure, but it's just been a wild couple of weeks, and I think this entire season has been off the rails. Like, I mean, really, nobody knew what to expect. It's like, this team's kind of not good, but then you bring in Dubas, and you got Erik Karlsson, who was like born to be a Penguin. But like, if you think Crystal Tang drives you crazy, Erik Karlsson's like times 10. So now having them both on the team together, to say that it's been chaotic, I think would be an understatement. So this team has confounded me all season. Like I usually take pride in like, well, I cover the team. I like to think if I lived in Vegas more times than not, I would know if they were going to win or not. Because when you're around the team as often as I am, you get a feel for these things. This team, I have no clue. They might still get in the playoffs. Everyone thinks they're done. I don't know. I wouldn't trust this team to win a game, but nor would I really be comfortable betting against them. I don't remember a Penguins team being this frustrating and this volatile. I mean, all season long, they don't make sense, Joe.
I think there's a better chance, Josh, of us everything falling our way. We beat the Predators, and then we have a demise on Long Island. It just seems like everything is leaning that way. I mean, the years, the names, they're infamous. As much as I detest the Flyers, no one has given us more heartbreak than the Fishermen. Like, it's it's insane, but I'm going to throw this theory out to you, Josh, and Corey, you can jump if you want. I think it all changed thanks to Kevin Acklin and Jaromir Jagr, because not only did that bring back goodwill, it brought back the big guy. The big guy showed up. And I'll tell you, I didn't feel right about anything when the big guy was golfing in Florida and not making his presence felt. And I don't care if he comes twice a year. Just the big guy's got to be in good graces. He has to be.
There's something great about Pittsburghers where we like have this severe anxiety about if our star athletes are going to live in Pittsburgh after they retire. And it's like people were like upset. Like I know we'll talk about it later how you saw Troy Polamalu at the game, but like, it's like, oh, Troy Polamalu retired. It's like, well, obviously he's going to live in, Pittsburgh forever, right? And it's like, no, he's from Southern California. Like, why would he stay here?
Well, I mean, Mario lives in heaven, but he has to show up every couple days, a couple times a year.
Yeah. Well, if he could just come down, descend upon us.
I remember, Corey, in 1997 when Mario retired for the first time. I can still see a big headline in the Post-Gazette: Lemieux makes retirement official, semicolon, plans to live in Pittsburgh. There's a really important thing. Oh, he's going to still live in Sewickley. That's great.
We just need to know that we're going to bump into them possibly at Giant Eagle.
Right. Yeah, I think that does go a long way in the city for some reason. I don't know why, but you're absolutely right. And it was funny you mentioned 68 and 66, because I thought all along that was going to be the highlight of the season until about 2 weeks ago. Then I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe something good's about to happen for the Penguins. But that was a magical weekend. I'm so glad you attended, Joe. I actually ran into you in the Lexus Club afterwards, and you were still glowing despite the 2-1 loss. You got to see your mistress team win at least. But it was a pretty incredible weekend, was it not?
It was, and I'll tell you the exact what happened was I was sitting at home. I actually thought I was going to be. I had my dates mixed. I'm bad with numbers and dates and count. I just thought I was supposed to be in Houston, which I was the week before when the initial thing came out, and I was just sitting at home, and then I just see the picture of Ronnie and Mario having dinner with Yogs, and I was like, as someone who's really been begging for this moment to happen since he left, and I blame a writer, not you, of course, for most of his problems. I'm like, how am I not there? I literally just freaked out on my couch, and within 5 minutes, I didn't call in any favors. I literally just got a ticket and a plane ticket in 5 minutes. I ran upstairs and told my wife I'm going to Pittsburgh. Take me to the airport in 4 hours. And that was early. And now when I got to see, I mean, in the one shot on the big screen, you had Jagr and Ronnie and Lemieux. My three, they're all on the big screen. Jagr said something funny, and I got to cheer all three of those guys. Stevens again. It was like I died in one. I mean, in one day, I got to cheer Mario and Yogs and Sid and Gino and Captain Ron all at one time. It was worth $2,000 on a credit card.
Yeah, I mean, it's never happened before. All those guys in the same place. And you know how it is. Mario's got a little bit of like the Wizard of Oz quality to him. He kind of disappears for a while. No one knows where he is or what he's doing. You know, he's playing golf. That's about it. And Yags is always, you know, in Czechia doing his thing. He only comes over here every so often when he gets the Vegas itch or whatever. So you don't really see all these guys in the same place. And Ronnie, of course, is the general manager of the Kraken. So no, that was quite a convergence of events, and the best part of it all was that Yags just didn't want to go home. Like he literally stayed. Then he came back a week later for Mario's fantasy camp. I think he spent like 5 of the last 7 weeks in Pittsburgh. So it has been nice having him back, and I got to tell you, I think he's enjoyed it even more than he thought he would. And it's good to have him back. It really
I
is.
mean, he's on the internet more than the Kardashians now. Have you? I mean,
Uh,
I follow. He's on everything he does is now being recorded, which is fantastic. I love every. I mean, Yager's on my Christmas tree for those who don't know every year. He is. I put him on the top of my tree. I mean, you know, he's. I
he,
love the big guy,
I,
and
I I don't know that he runs his Instagram account, but man, is it busy. I mean, it really is. He is very active indeed.
It's a full
what
time job.
I mean was. I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm kind of, you know, I'm crazy. I'm not as grounded as you, Josh. There was 5% chance in my mind that he was going to sign like a 10-day contract and work the power play. I mean, it had to
It
come
couldn't have
up.
hurt. I mean,
It had to
honestly, the
come
way
up. It
putting 68 on the half wall. Do you think that's going to hurt the power play? I'd be okay with it.
No, and I wonder, you know, we make a big deal about the fact that he hasn't officially retired yet, but if I'm not mistaken, he hasn't played a game in months. And I wonder if he is done and if the last time we ever see him skate was actually on Pittsburgh ice during the warmups, which was pretty cool because you recall, Joe, like everyone was there for the ceremony and we all head to the bathroom or to get a drink or to get something to eat, you know, during warmups. And then I see people like sprinting back into the ice area. I'm thinking, what's going on? Then I look up on the monitor and I see Yager on the ice. Like, oh, that's what's going on. That was the whole experience was really something.
well, they were all wearing his number in the mullet, and then I'm like, you know, I've done a lot of drugs, and I don't see that well. And I swear to God, that's Yager. It was.
Joe's just having an old acid trip.
Right. Well, the 90s flashbacks were in more ways than one for Joe, apparently, during those moments. And
Yes.
no, it was great. But you know, I thought that was the highlight of the season, and I guess it was, but
But now we've
I did not expect this wild ride in the last few weeks all of a sudden to possibly lead to a playoff berth.
yeah, and I mean, you know, I'll say just from having young kids to adding in like that element to them getting to see Yager, we would play in the driveway and it was always, you know, Crosby and Malkin versus, you know, Daddy. And now that's Lemieux and Yager, and that's who they are. And then we had to buy their jerseys, and you know, like so it was cool that part of it. But yeah, and then I mean, it kind of reinvigorated the season. You know, and they got on a little bit of a tear, but boy, oh boy, I mean, in and out of the playoff picture, and what is killing this team the most is the defensive woes, in my opinion. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about that. And I mean, Eric Carlson, God love him, you know, for everything that Lemieux, like, you know, if it was a dedication to Lemieux or Crosby, they're going to come out and, you know, light the lamp. They're going to they're going to tear it up if it's a special occasion. Eric Carlson did literally the opposite of that for his 1000th game. So I think not trying to pick on him too much, but boy, oh boy, that just epitomizes what the problems are with the team.
He's one of the strangest players I've ever covered. And I have all the appreciation in the world for his offensive genius, and I don't use that word lightly. He makes passes every game and makes plays with his skating that other people just can't make. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. We all know that. But you watch him in his defensive zone, like the way he played in the third period against Detroit the other night. I mean, he was a train wreck. He almost lost that game 5 different times before he finally won it in overtime. There's a great divide too. The analytics community loves him. They think he's Bobby Orr, but they conveniently ignore like the 10 unbelievable mistakes he makes every game. He's like Latang on crack. He really is. Like he can do things offensively that even Chris can't do. But boy, if you think Chris can implode every now and then, you watch number 65 for a couple of games. So I don't feel like he's been a great fit, like he's necessarily what they need. I still think it was a great trade. when you consider everything they got rid of. And he might still get more comfortable maybe in year 2 in Pittsburgh. That happens with defensemen sometimes, but you just don't know what you're going to get from this guy from one day to the next.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that he has all the skills. I just don't think he's used to playing on a good team. Or maybe has a defenseman that really, I think Marcus Pettersson, I mean, there's a half the time this year I've thought to myself, where would we be without Marcus Pettersson? And if I would have said that 2 years ago, I would have jumped off a bridge. So I'm not blaming Marcus Pettersson whatsoever, but I think he needs, a Brooks Orpik back there. I think he needs someone that just stands in front of the net, his own net. The trade was great. I said if Carlson never played a second for Pittsburgh, it'd be like the 5th best trade in Penguins history, just from everybody they got rid of. So I'm okay with that. I just don't think he's a winning player. I think he's used to playing on teams that have, even Ottawa, but they had like 4 scrubs in him. So it's like he was doing everything. Then San Jose, it didn't really matter what anybody did. They were just good for their cookies. So, that's just the type of player he is. I'm more upset with, and this is, I think, a bigger picture issue of just how dumb they play as a team. And I think that's what has killed us. Even over the power play, which is legendarily bad. I just think giving up goals at the end of periods or right after you score a goal, and then you say, oh, yeah, they have Crosby and they have Gino. They should learn. They should know. But I'm going to say this, Josh, and I'm going to let you speak because you know way more about it than I do. I think Sullivan's biggest problem this year is he hasn't had one line. And that doesn't always have to be Stahl, Cook, and Tyler Kennedy. He doesn't have one line he can put on the ice to say, you know what, for 45 seconds, no one's doing anything stupid. They don't have one line that'll do that.
No, you're right. Real quick on Carlson. This is the first time that he hasn't been the best player on his team, really, in his entire career. Ottawa, San Jose, he was always the guy. I almost think offensively he defers too much. Like even on his game-winning goal against Detroit, I don't know if you heard what he said after the game. He said, well, I was looking for somebody to pass to, and I didn't see anyone open, so I just had to shoot. Like he didn't want to shoot. It's like, Eric, you're a star, man. Just be a little greedy offensively. Try to score yourself. Like shoot the puck. He's such of a Penguin, though. That's the way he plays. He's like vintage Penguins hockey. It really is. As for the stupidity of this team, the collective hockey IQ on this team is so low, it's unbelievable. It really makes no sense. This is, I think, the second oldest team in the league now. It was the oldest before some of the trade. So it's an old team, and yet they play like such of an immature brand of hockey. Like we all knew against Tampa they were going to come back and tie it. We all knew against Detroit they were going to come, but you could feel it. And it's not anything that those teams were doing. They just make such horrible fundamental mistakes every single night. I know a lot of people want to blame the coaches. Fire Sully, blame Sully. Like, I don't think, Sully coached these guys to championships in 16 and 17. I don't think he forgot what he was doing. It's fair to blame the coaches for some things, sure. But I just think you have guys like Carlson and Letang and Malkin. These are renegade personalities. I don't really think coaches tell them what to do. And then you do have a few young guys who make mistakes, and you add it all together, and it's entertaining, but it's incredibly painful to watch. And I'll tell you, after the Detroit game the other night, I'm on the elevator with Kyle Dubas. We're going down to the locker room, and I looked at him. I said, "Hey, nice win." Because I don't think he was real thrilled with the third period, right? He looks at me and he says, "Hey, you can write whatever you want. Just don't overwrite that I've ever put together a boring hockey team." I said, no, sir, you have never done that. But they could use a little bit of boring in their game right now.
Yeah, and you can say what you want about the coaches, but I guarantee you none of the coaches told Eric Carlson to leave the front of the net and go double team somebody behind the net.
Right.
It's just that's not happening, and it's the pinches and then not just the defensive woes, but I guess I'll give this to the coaches a little bit. What do you guys think about the overtime woes? Like, think about if they were just an average overtime performing team, where they'd be.
Well, I don't know if Gino I know he's got the the excitement of having mom and dad in town. I think he might have got some of the OV gas they give away in the KHL, because until about 3 weeks ago, he looked like Brian Boyle slow. And now he's flying around. I always thought that was evident in overtime, was once you got past Sid and Rusty or Sid and Snake, Gino was slow. And
Yeah.
I think their speed hurts them. And for some reason, and my dad will listen to this and he'll be like, "You got it." They never win the opening faceoff. That's one of my dad's big pet peeves, and that's a huge thing in overtime. So they clean that up. I think that would go a long way, Josh.
I have a lot of theories on the whole 3-on-3 problem, and if they don't make the playoffs, you can argue the 3-on-3 and the power play are the two biggest reasons why. 3-on-3, I will say this, and a lot of people in town have been talking about this, and it's true. They don't practice it. I have not seen them practice 3-on-3 one time all season. So they don't work on it. They don't really seem to have a plan. Like I don't know what they're trying to accomplish sometimes 3-on-3. And some guys like Gino, you're right. Gino looks slow in that much open space. But I also just don't think he's any good at it. Like I just don't think he has a feel for the open ice in that way. So it's been a disaster. And the single biggest problem I have with how they've played 3-on-3 and what I don't understand, Carlson and Letang should be absolutely dominant in that setting, and they're not. They're not at all. They struggle as much as anybody. So it makes no sense. And I also think when all your 3-on-3 guys, Carlson, Letang, Crosby, Malkin, Rust, they're all getting old, or in some cases they are old. And I think just when you've already played 20 plus minutes and now you've got all that open ice against guys who are 10 years younger than you, I think that might be part of it as well. But man, it has just been a problem from day one.
Yeah, and I mean, it just takes me back to I don't know when that started, maybe '06. I mean, it might have been the year. No, they didn't do it. They weren't good at the shootout the first year, Sid's first year. But I remember they used to practice it all the time. Like at the end of every practice, that's all they did. They would
Oh, yeah.
finish with a shootout. And back in the Eric Christensen days, whenever they would, I mean, they had 100 probably like 105 points or something like that the first year they made it to the playoffs in Sid's career, and at least 10 of those were shootout points. So it goes a long way. I don't know why they don't practice it. I wish they would, but I mean, there's enough to pick on the team about. But before we finish this first segment, let's get into some positives. And this run has really been highlighted, in my opinion, by what Michael Bunting has brought to the team. I mean, Josh, I think I texted you the one game. I said, how in the world did trading Jake Gensel improve our team? Like, I mean, I've never seen anything like this before, where a seller actually acquired something that turned it around. And I think he's got a little bit of that sandpaper, that the Patrick Hornquist that we kind of needed. But what do you guys see, from positives, Bunting on down?
Yeah, I mean, Bunting, listen, he's not Jake Ensel. He's not the prolific scorer that Jake is. We all know that. But in some ways, I think Bunting's exactly what the Penguins needed. The Penguins have too many guys who are far too polite on the ice, right? Rickard Rakell, he's a lovely man. He's actually too nice of a man. They have too many guys like that. Bunting, you're right. He plays with sandpaper. He's when there's a little bit of a skirmish, he jumps on the pile. Like he's that guy. And look at where he scores his goals, right in front of the net. I give Kyle Dubas credit for that one. Kyle's made some mistakes as his first year as GM, no doubt. But I think getting Bunting was a big deal. Those two go all the way back to Sault Ste. Marie, and then he had him with the Maple Leafs, brought him to Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden, like they can go sign Jake this summer if they want. I don't know that that's going to happen, but it's still available to them. And you got a good player in Bunting for a couple of more years, and you've got three pretty decent looking prospects and a draft pick that'll be a first or second rounder. People were so critical of that trade the night it went down, but I don't think it was a terrible trade, Joe.
No, I was okay with the trade because I think everyone knew that Jake was leaving and he had to go somewhere, and he held out to the end. I was never the biggest Bunting guy until now, and I know, well, once you join the Penguins, you're gonna be my guy. But he seemed to tone down a lot of the BS, and he seemed to just be playing hockey and scoring big goals, and I love that. The bonuses for me the last 3 or 4 weeks were, really the team went sideways when Rusty and Jake both got hurt. That was kind of when we went from playoff positioning to, oh my God, are we going to tank? And, I've always been a Rusty guy. Other than, the big four, he's my guy. And not the big four. I mean, the original big four. It's like, after the guys whose numbers are retired, it basically goes Kevin Stevens and then Brian Rust. I love Mr. Elimination. I think he's stepped up. I think I see him as the next Penguin captain. I mean, really, in 5 years, but I just love Rusty's game. He gets better and better. I think they found something in Drew O'Connor now. I didn't know what he was going to be. He's a legitimate top 6 guy. He's going to get better. I wish he had a little bit more Rottweiler in him. He seemed like a nice big old lab. But the other day, he jumped up and defended Crosby a little bit. I said on TV, you don't have to fight. You have to be like the guy in The Godfather, the baker. Just put your hand in your jacket. People don't know you don't have a gun. Just get there.
And
Just get there. And I'm sorry. My one other big point I really liked was I like the 2 kids. I like Shea. I like the 2 the defensive kids. I like Shea and I like Ivany. Cheaper defensemen that actually play a little body, go in front of the net, play defense. I think that's huge. I'll see these guys for years to come. I think those are my 3 favorite things about what's gone down.
Yeah, well, Jack St. Ivany is a Manhattan Beach kid, so you can go have lunch with him this summer and give him a pep talk. I really like him. I think he's a good player. I want to see more of him. And those 2, they've got a confidence about them. Like they're not afraid of the big moments. And let's be honest, the Penguins have been better the second they were inserted instead of Ryan Graves. I mean, this is undeniable how much better the blue line has looked with those 2. And you're right about Rusty. I hold him in such high regard. The guy's got a career high 28 goals. He's missed 20 games. Like how many goals? He might have been pushing a 40-goal season. Like that's how good he has been. Not to mention he's a great penalty killer. And the word leadership gets overused in sports. That guy's a leader. I mean, he wears it on his sleeve. He was so pissed off after that game last night. He could barely speak. He was just shaking almost. He was so angry.
And how about that pass?
Oh,
that pass was beautiful. And remember his rookie year? Like he couldn't even throw a pass. He was going for the Cy Young.
Listen, Sid's first or Rusty's first season, it was during the mumps outbreak, and they had to bring all these kids up from the AHL. So they put Rusty on Sid's line that night because they had no one else. And at the end of the first period, Sid went into Mike Johnson's office and he said, "Get this guy off my line." And they said, "Why?" He said, "Well, he won't give me the puck. All he does is shoot every time I give it to him." And now Sid would go nuts if you took him off of his line because he has become that important to the Penguins. He's a great player. He really is. And I guess we should, before we go to break, mention the captain himself. I don't know what else needs to be said about what he's doing right now. He's got 26 points in his last 16 games. He's got 90 points now, and he should really have about 120. I mean, really, if he played on a functional power play, if he hadn't lost Jake for all that time, who knows how many points he would have. But I marvel at what he's doing right now, guys.
Yeah, it's a sin. I didn't even
We've
talk
wasted
about
this.
It's
a sin that the Penguins have wasted this performance.
It's a sin that we've gone like 30 minutes. It's the first time we've actually said what an incredible. I mean, we literally take him for granted. I mean, I remember I had to be the only guy west of the Mississippi watching the lottery on the internet. And it's the highest I ever jumped in my life when we won. But you could have never even imagined he'd be this good.
No.
I mean,
for this long, he's still pretty much as good as he was when he was 19 or 20, when he was, clearly became the best player in the league. I hope people appreciate what they are watching with him. This is true greatness for almost 20 years. It doesn't happen in this sport quite like this. And it would be a true shame if they don't make the playoffs. I'm going to make some fan bases mad, but if you're just a casual hockey observer, would you rather see the New York Islanders in a playoff series, or would you rather see Sidney Crosby playing like this? I mean, it would be a waste to not have him in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope my prediction is that like you said, that 2 decades of greatness. I think he ends up number 2 all time in points. He's definitely got a shot to do it.
Right.
And yeah, just when we got that lottery pick, I could have never predicted. And then you go back to his injuries, like we didn't think this was going to happen. So yeah, the Pens fans, I soak it up and enjoy it. I was in Cedar Point's parking lot whenever I found out that we got him of all the places.
I was in the Atlantic Ocean. I was on vacation with a buddy at Myrtle Beach. I got back. It wasn't on TV because it was South Carolina, right?
Yeah.
So I go into my hotel room and I see my phone has like 100 texts, something, and oh God, I think somebody's dead in my family. And then I look and I see over Crosby. Like, oh, that's what happened.
Yeah. Oh man, what a day. What a day. Well, yeah, after the break, we're gonna get into, some things we've learned from this team and positives going forward, and what the outlook looks like for the rest of the season here. Welcome back into Two for Talking with Josh Yohe and Joe Bartnick. We will get into some positives and what we were talking about positives in the last segment. We want to get into what we've learned about this team going forward, and I think whether or not they make the playoffs, this has been a step in the right direction to set the tone for Crosby's final couple years, and hopefully have some success. What have you guys taken away from it?
Well, here's my big takeaway when I think of Kyle Dubas and I think about moving forward. I know a lot of people, blow it up, you got to rebuild. As long as Sidney Crosby's on this roster, I don't think they're ever going to be bad enough where you can just blow it up. I don't think it's going to work that way. And I do wonder if what the Penguins have done the last few weeks is going to alter Kyle's approach this summer a little bit. I still think they will try to shed some salary, but I don't think the focus is going to completely be on getting younger and getting more draft picks. I really think he's going to try to make this team better next season. Now, does that mean they're going to go trade a first round pick? Or no, not. They'll still try to conserve most of their assets. But I think there's a feeling of, man, if we just had a bottom six that didn't stink, and if we maybe had a little more stability on special teams, like, geez, we might actually be pretty good because the Eastern Conference stinks. Like, I've been watching all the best teams in the East, guys, lately, the Rangers or Toronto, even Boston last night. I'm not that impressed. It's a terrible conference. It really is. So I wonder if that might whet the Penguins' appetite to try to just be a little better and a little more aggressive in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought, I mean, give or take 4 or 5 points, I thought this is where it would be. I thought Carolina, because Rod Brindamore, they play hard on Tuesdays, and Winnipeg would be ahead of us. And I thought the Rangers are just better than us. But other than that, I thought we'd be right there fighting Ovi and the Fishermen. So that's where we are. I thought they would have shot Tortorella by now in Philly. So I never thought Philly would still be there. But it is what it is. I think what they figured out was, I think they got some young defensemen that can play. And I think they have 5 of the top 6 forwards figured out. And maybe Lars Eller is still going to be your number 3 center. Raquel, I think Raquel's played okay. I'd love to get rid of his contract. I don't know who they can get better than him, but maybe someone at $3 million can play just as good. And then after that, I think it's going to throw everybody in, Wilkes-Barre and all the, see what happens at camp, see what shakes out. I think the bigger question, maybe, and this can lead into what Josh wanted to maybe talk about, I think it leads into, we can probably really trade Jari, which I kind of wanted to do at the deadline, even before Ned went on a roll, and just to get out from out of that contract and let the young kid come up and see what he can do. I think that's what we learned. It sign Ned to a reasonable No one's gonna give Ned a ton of money, and
Right.
then see what we got with Bloomquist. I was shocked they traded our third, or the other gorilla netminder. To be honest with you, Josh.
The monster.
Yeah.
Well, no, the goaltending situation moving forward is really interesting. Bloomquist is a guy they really, really like. This is going to be an NHL goaltender. How good will he be? We don't know yet, but he's on the trajectory to be in the NHL probably next season. I think there's a real chance. Jari is so interesting to me. I don't think anybody denies the physical talent that he has. You could make an argument in terms of pure talent. He's probably a top 10 NHL goaltender. But do you trust him? Do you trust him in big games and big moments? I don't think anybody does. And here's the thing. I like Ned too, and I would try to bring Ned back. Absolutely. Great guy. He's a good goaltender. He's only 28. He's still getting better. Jari, to me, has just lost all confidence from the front office, from the coaching staff, because Ned has been good during this stretch. He hasn't been Patrick Waugh, okay? But they keep going back with Ned every single game. And that tells me in their minds, like, Jari isn't really a number 1 goaltender, because if they really viewed him that way, he would have been back in the net before the second period against the Bruins the other night. So I think there is a real chance they trade him this summer. I don't know what his market value is, but if you're the Penguins, if you're a Penguins fan, you should be rooting for Colorado and Edmonton and Toronto, all these teams with goalie issues, cheer for them to flame out in the first round and get desperate for a goalie. Because if you could unload Jari's salary, I really think that's in the best interest for the Penguins moving forward.
See,
Yeah.
that's an interesting point to me because I don't think Jari's I think on paper, maybe if you read all-star selections, but is he really an upgrade over like Georgiev and, Freddie Anderson or Samsonov? Like, that's what I mean. That's what makes me hard to think that Toronto is going to be, oh my God, well, let's go get Jari or Avalanche or whoever, it just seems to me like, I don't know. To me, it's like another guy we have to sweeten the trade with because I'd be looking to sweeten the trade with Graves. Like, who do you want to take Graves?
That's the one. They would love to, I'm sure. I don't know if it's possible to pull that off. Jari, I think there would be some interest in Jari. They might have to retain a little bit of money, and that might be okay. That might be worth it if it comes down to that. I don't think you're going to win with him. I just don't. There's something about him.
We haven't.
Yeah, in big games, you can't trust the guy. And if you look at his numbers, I have never seen a goaltender in his career who had better first half of the season numbers and worse second half of the season numbers. His numbers after the All-Star break are absolutely awful almost every season. It's really weird, but it's a trend at this point. And I know it's not easy playing goal for the Penguins. They're not the 95 Devils. I get it. But I just don't trust the guy. And I have been told by people that I trust they didn't really want to give him a 5-year contract last summer. I just think they felt cornered. They needed a goaltender and he had some leverage and they had to give it to him. I don't think they ever wanted to. I'm very curious to see what happens this summer because Ned's the kind of guy I don't think you want to let him go.
Well, I mean, Jari is the James Neal of goaltending. He's Mr. November. He's
fire off a
great.
couple
He's
shots,
great when it doesn't matter. When it doesn't matter, you score your goals.
Right. And I understand the sample size in the playoffs is small, and I will always give him credit for what he did at Game 7 in the Garden 2 years ago. He shouldn't have been playing. He was hurt. He came back and played because everybody knew Louis Domingue, his 15 minutes of fame was way over. So I always gave Jari credit for the guts he showed that night, even though they lost. But I just don't think you're going to win with him. Not here. I just don't see it. I think he makes too much money. You have a guy, Ned, who you could probably lock up for a couple of years at, I don't know, $3 million a year, 2.5, something like that. That's the route I would take. But there's a lot of guys on this team I'd like to see them move. I think Raquel, if they could, make sense. Graves, obviously. Jari, I think, and Riley Smith doesn't want to be here. He's made that incredibly clear. So I still think he will be moved this summer. So they have some contracts to shed that could make them a much better team if Kyle's able to pull that off.
That being said about Riley Smith, though, I was for that trade. Now he has not nearly become what I thought he would become, but I was never enamored with Jason Zucker. I was just kind of like, he talked a lot for a guy that never won anything.
He did. But
I'm sure you were happy about that, Josh, because he was always good for a quote. But I'm like, why are you talking?
Well, he did, but I'll tell you what, he played about twice as hard as Riley Smith has ever played this season, and I liked the trade at the time too. Just watching those Vegas teams over the years, he always jumped out at me. I always thought he's a really good player. I mean, there have been people in the organization have told me like he just doesn't want to be here. Like he didn't want to be traded from Vegas. He wasn't happy about it. He's kind of a sour puss in the locker room. Even watching him play, he doesn't look like the kind of guy who's going to run through a wall for you. And they just have too many guys like that. So yeah, this offseason is going to be very interesting with the Penguins because I still think Kyle could certainly get rid of some contracts and make some pretty big changes.
Well, I thought it was evident that I thought he was playing pretty good. He had a little chemistry with Gino. He thought maybe he'd get his numbers up and be good for the deadline deal. And then he went with his team to the White House. I thought that was like seeing your old girlfriend at the beach. He forgot how good he forgot how hot she was, and after he went to the White House, he was never the same guy.
No, he wasn't. It was really weird. Game in Vegas back in January. He was hurt that night, but he was with the Penguins in Vegas. And I think Jonathan Marchessault's kid was playing in an intermission game, and the little kids are on the ice playing. And Riley Smith walks over to watch, and he goes and sits on Vegas's bench during the intermission with Jonathan Marchessault to watch. I know they're watching kids. That's not a big deal, but we all kind of said like, it was just kind of odd. Like, You could like sit on your own team's bench and you'd still be 2 feet away from Marchessault. It was just kind of, it was just kind of, I think, an illustration of him being very comfortable in Vegas. And you're right though. In October, he and Gino look great together. It's like, whoa, they've got serious chemistry. And then it just went away, and he's never really been the same guy since.
Yeah, it was that White House visit.
I
White
think
House
you're right.
visit took it down. Well, now looking at, I mean, Penguins have 2 games left. We got the Predators tomorrow night. Well, if you're listening to this on Monday, it's tonight, and then the Islanders on Thursday to close it out. We have to have some things fall our way, but looking ahead, I mean, do you guys? We kind of talked about earlier. You never know. This is the craziest season. I mean, the fact that a team with 86 points is, still in it, is crazy, because usually I would think you'd need at least 93, 94 to get in. What do you guys think is going to happen here? I mean, crazier things have happened. We've seen it, but I hate being in the Steelers position. That's what I felt like this whole time. We're in the Steelers zone where, like, well, if we win and a couple things go our way, we might be all right. Like, but I feel pretty good about our game against the Predators. But like Joe said earlier, I'm a little worried about the Island.
Yeah, I just think that's what's going to happen. The Preds are in the playoffs, which they're a better team than I thought they would be this season. Maybe if Saros doesn't play, that really helps us, even though their young kid goaltender is very good. I got to say, I've always thought Yossi was a little overrated. That guy is incredible. He might be 6th or 7th on my ballot for MVP. But maybe he'll take the night off. He can rest. I don't know. I just see us winning that game, things remotely falling our way, and then it all coming crashing on Long Island in some format. That's what I predict.
Yeah, that sounds very plausible. I think the Penguins will probably beat Nashville. The Preds don't really have anything to play for in this game. They clinched the playoff. I don't know if they care about who they play in the first round. Maybe they do, but it doesn't mean a whole lot to them. The Penguins, for whatever reason, always play well against them in Pittsburgh, especially. I suspect the Penguins will win. The question then becomes, do they get any help? I really like Boston to win in Washington on Monday night. I just think the Bruins are better. And I know the Capitals beat Tampa, but I don't think the Capitals are any good. And that Boston still got something to play for. So I think that might work in the Penguins' favor. I think the real problem here for the Penguins now is the Detroit Red Wings. They play Montreal twice, and Montreal's got to win one of those games. It can be an overtime or a shootout. Montreal's got to win one of those games. And the Canadiens aren't terrible. And especially in Montreal, like weird things can happen there. It's never easy playing the Habs in Quebec. So stranger things could happen. And I don't think the Red Wings are some great machine of a hockey team, but I still think they're better than Montreal. So the Penguins are going to need a break there, unless, of course, the Islanders care to lose in Newark on Monday. But anything can happen. None of these teams is that good. But I kind of feel like the Islanders will win that game.
Yeah, and mentioning that Red Wings stuff, I don't know if you guys felt this way, but as soon as we gave away that loser point to the Red Wings, I was like, that's going to come back to bite us. It just felt like I didn't even celebrate that much whenever Carlson scored in overtime, because I was like, well, whatever. Like that's gonna be the nail in the coffin.
The loser point changes everything. Just ask the Islanders. They have about 20 of them, I think. It's unbelievable. Like if they get in, that's really what's going to put them over the top. With all due respect to Patty Waugh and some of the Penguin killers on that roster, I don't really think the Islanders are that good of a hockey team. But you could say that about any of these teams. Like, are the Flyers any good on paper? They're terrible on paper. I actually give Torch credit for what he's gotten out of that team, but they're not very good. And we watch the Penguins every game. They might have more top tier talent than these teams, but we certainly know what their flaws are, and they are some serious flaws. So I don't remember a time when the middle of a conference was just this mediocre, for the lack of a better word.
No, I think the Islanders are definitely I think the Islanders are the best team in this mix of 4 or 5 teams. Although I think if Lyon plays decent in that, I think the Red Wings are pretty good, are a pretty good team. The Flyers stink. I mean, I'm not just being an a-hole and hate the Flyers. They stink. But the beauty is Tortorella runs them into the ground, so they'll never have a lottery pick. So they're never going to get a superstar. And no one who's any good ever goes to play for Tortorella. So they'll always be in this middle, which I love. It's the best thing that could happen. The best thing that happened as a Penguin fan of the Flyers was when they fired Peter Laviolette. They were just starting to turn the corner into becoming a real hockey organization, and they fired him. And they've been jokes again ever since.
I know the
You know what's funny?
2012 playoff series. That was whenever I started to get a little worried.
Yeah, understandably so. And you know what's funny about Torts? Honestly, from all the guys I've talked with over the years, 90% of players love playing for him, but the 10% of the best players in the league want nothing to do with playing.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. Like seriously, Brooks Orpik played for him in like a world championship one year, and he wouldn't stop talking about how much he loved playing for him. Like, well, yeah, because he would appreciate Brooks. They would see the game in similar ways, probably. I don't think 87 or 71 would ever want anything to do with playing for him. That's just like Marion Gaborik hated playing for him in New York. Like, there's a long list of guys like that. So all of these teams are very
Vinny
interesting.
the Cavier.
Yeah, there's another one. Like, I mean, you look at the East, like I almost don't want the regular season to end because I'm actually fascinated by it. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but everyone just assumes, the Penguins are done. You know, all these teams are going to win now. Like, don't be so sure. They haven't really won that much all season. Like, none of these teams is that good, I assure you. So anything can happen. If the Penguins get 4 points in their last two games, they've got a 50-50 chance to get it, in my opinion. But if that game means anything to the Islanders on Wednesday, if you know your Penguins history, 1975, 1982, 1993, 2019, 2021, a lot of bad things happen to the Penguins when they have to play that franchise.
It's still the worst loss of anything in my life was 1993.
May 14th.
As much as and you guys know, and everyone who's listening to this knows how much I love hockey and the Penguins. I don't love them as much as I used to because of 1993. I can't let myself be that open like I was then. Like the wound is still there, it's still raw.
Yeah, that was I was 13 years old and I remember it like it was yesterday. I can still hear the silence in the arena. Like, and no, we didn't think that team could ever lose. Like they were invincible. And
No, I can
until they
still
weren't.
see it.
Yeah,
I can still see it. I mean,
I was 7, and so when I'm 5, they win the Stanley Cup, and I'm really getting into hockey. 6, they win the Stanley Cup. I'm all in. That's my life now. So 93, I mean, I all I knew was that the Penguins won the Stanley Cup. So like during that whole series, I can remember being like, "We'll be fine, we'll be fine," and then it was just like I like looked at my dad like, What now? Like is there game? Can we do game 8 or something? Like there's got to be because we should have won. Like what happened? And that's why in 2017, I don't think I breathed during the entire game 7 overtime. And my wife's sitting there like she's like nervous too, but she's like, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "I've been down this road. We should win the Stanley Cup, but we're gonna lose to some low rate team that's gonna come in and beat us in Game 7." So yeah, I hate to see it come down to the Islanders again. Other than 2013, I don't think we've never beat them in the playoffs.
And even in that series, that they gave the Penguins way more than they wanted, and that Penguins team was a juggernaut. So no, but the situation the Penguins are in now, all you can hope for is that game is for all the marbles. That's the reality of the situation, So
it is interesting though that I mean, like about 3 weeks ago, whenever there was guys saying, "Yeah, there's still a chance," I was looking like we were closer to Ottawa than we were to the Islanders. Like 3 weeks ago. It's all like I said, it's all kind of gravy. I just know it's going to come down to the island. If we win that game, something will happen where Detroit will win out. Like I don't know. It's bad things happen on the island with the fishermen.
That's absolutely true. When the Islanders are involved, and the Penguins have actually played pretty well against them this season. So there is that. If you're looking for something, and of course, the best news for the Penguins right now is that they have the tiebreaker on all of these teams. So if they get a little bit of a break and everybody ends up knotted, they will get the advantage.
How do we have the tiebreaker? Most unforced turnovers or most 2-on-1s going the other way. What stat do we have on these guys?
The league feels bad for the Penguins, given how irresponsible they are. The oldest team in the league is like the most irresponsible team in the league. It's the strangest thing about this team. Like, and it's been like that for years, but it's out of control. The shorthanded goals alone are gonna like take years off of Sullivan's life. Like every time they give up a shorty, I look at him on the bench and he literally just wants to punch somebody.
It looked like he's gonna squeeze the stuffing out of himself. Like he's just like he's like holding on for dear life. He's gonna explode.
Well, when I see whenever Tampa gets a power play or the Capitals get a power play or Detroit or the Avalanche, you think like they're going to score. Like, I can't wait to watch this. It's exciting. When we get a power play, I'm like, oh God, let's just don't give up a shorthanded goal. That's all I think is don't give up a shorty. I never think positive. And I'm a positive guy. I
Yeah.
never think positive when the power play's out there.
No, you are. It's to the point where I think people are just happy if they break even and they don't give up a shorty. That's a successful power play. And you look at the collection of talent on the ice, and I know everybody wants to give Todd Reardon a rough time for it. You got like 4 Hall of Famers on the power play. If they can't figure something out, like I don't think the coaches are going to get any of the credit if they had the best power play in the league. It would all be, oh, it's Sid and Gino and Carlson, whatever. But because it's not working, we blame Todd Reardon. But listen, the best players haven't been able to figure out all season, and I still hold them far more accountable than I hold anyone else.
Well, I'm not going to blame Todd Reardon. He seems like a nice family man. But I will say this. Why can't we just go back to the 1-3-1? It's only worked for the last 50 years I've watched hockey. Like every team uses every good team uses the 1-3-1. Find someone to play the bumper, find someone to take punishment in front of the net, sit in jail on the wings, Letang, I don't care who up top, shoot the puck, get the rebound, and that's it. There's no way that they would be last or second to last if they just did that.
And I thought Bunting was going to do that. Like I thought, oh man, maybe we got this.
There's no they try to reinvent the wheel. And it's like it just takes that. That's all it takes.
Well, for years now, they've tried to create the Mona Lisa every time they're on the power play, right? And then you throw Carlson into the mix. He's a great player. He won't shoot. He's always looking for a stick when he has the puck. Always. Even when he's going to shoot it, it's a shot pass. And if you look at the best power plays, okay, we always think of Edmonton as the best power play. Well, what they do is pretty simple. Okay, McDavid uses his speed to kind of loosens up the defense, passes to the point, Bouchard shoots. That's what they do more than anything, and it works. The Penguins, for whatever reason, can't grasp that concept, and there are more problems to it than just that. But it has. I mean, what are they still 31st in the league? How is this possible? And yet here we are. If they had an average power play, we wouldn't be talking about needing help this week to make the playoffs. They long would have clinched.
Yeah, I mean, we have all summer and a podcast every week to talk about this, but that would be my one question of Sullivan, of retaining him, is just kind of like, do you need someone that be able to they have to fix it. I mean, they can't go another year like this.
No, there's no question about that, because I mean it's been an embarrassment all year, and it's not just the inefficiency; it's the shorthanded goals against.
That's what I mean. It's the whole package. That whole package of that. Like, well, if you're not gonna, and it's so funny because you brought up Mike Johnson before about the Rusty thing, and I immediately had a flashback, a bad acid flashback. That was the one time I lost my marbles on puck off. We'd been doing it like 6 or 7 years, and I just said, Frazier, you've never heard me. I mean, it was like, other than the team moving, I've never been in a situation where I was that upset. It was like, he was like, didn't know what to do. It was like we were at the lowest we could ever be, and then we get Sullivan, and everything turned around. So I thank Sully for everything. I'm not trying to push him out the door. There's just some things about this team that I don't know if he can fix.
Yeah, well, they are the definition of insanity in a lot of different ways, and in the power plays probably Exhibit A, right? I mean,
well, the beer distributors of Western Pennsylvania really appreciate this Penguins team, because I mean the icy lights are going down quick. And I love too, by the way, that this was supposed to be the positive segment. This is like, if this doesn't sum up the Penguins season.
We just tell it like it is here on this podcast, It's not all bad, but it's not all good. It's interesting, at least.
I think the bottom line is just 3 guys who love the Penguins, and we've all we're like a combined like over a century of watching hockey. So it's like, we've seen this fish before. It's like
we've lived through like, oh, what are you talking about? For those young Pens fans that don't know about it, getting an offensive defenseman to come in and not shoot the puck is old news to us. Like, I've been yelling at Sergei Zubov to shoot the puck. Like.
I mean, I'm sorry. Like, you guys are younger than me. I remember when we wore blue, not ironically, like before the big guy. We were people. I can't even imagine. Before the big guy, we were the Clippers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was the joke, and I wish I could have been there for those days because I only got a glimpse of it. And I say this like we want the team to be good always, but Joe, doesn't isn't there something special about back in those days whenever there was nobody in the arena and you knew everybody was a true hockey fan? Because I look at like the last few years before the lockout, we didn't make the playoffs for like 3 years in a row, and me and my buddy would go student rush all the time, and there was like 11,000 people there, but you knew it was 11,000 people that really cared, and like when they win the cup again, you're all there, like that those people are still there. I kind of miss that kind of stuff. I don't want to go through that again, but
Well, that's why my wife doesn't begrudge me any single thing about my hockey love, because she remembers when it was the Dick Tarnstrom era, and I had Direct TV, and I still and TiVo, and I still watched every single game. And what, we won like 11 games that year.
yeah.
I actually call it the Kelly Bucherberger era. Remember when he was the
Oh
captain?
yeah.
He was our Jeff Otter. Just got to get his head kicked in every night. It was so sad.
I
But
think he
now we're
scored
here.
his first goal at the like, I mean, like New Year's or something like that. And that might have been his only goal. And I remember, and God bless him, Steve McKenna, seemed like a good guy. But I remember going to a game in the F balcony at the Mellon and at the Civic Arena, and he scored a goal. And somebody said, Mike Lang phrase, he said, boy, he didn't even score at the eighth grade picnic, like.
No, no, listen, this is a fascinating franchise. It has been forever, whether they're good or bad. And for me, it's just like being in the press box. Like last night, I'm walking through the press box. Craig Patrick's still at every game. He's always sitting beside EJ. EJ sitting there telling Bobby Orr stories and stuff. It's like, man, I got the greatest job in the world. Like all these great characters from Penguins, present and past are all like converging, and they still love the Penguins. They're still there every night in the press box. So, no, it's never a boring franchise for me to write about.
Well,
No.
we can rack up the second segment with, I'll tell you what it really changed was when we got an offensive defenseman. Everything really changed when we got Paul Coffey.
That's
And I
right.
remember when that trade happened, I was in Dormont having a pop, and it was like, we got the doctor.
You had to have been stunned.
Wow. And it was just like, it's all of a sudden we got a guy, like we got a winner. Like it was just like we got Edmonton Oiler. I mean, we never had anybody like that before.
Paul Coffey was my first hockey jersey. Like I wore number 77 on probably the first 5 hockey teams I played for. I loved Paul Coffey.
Yeah, but with all due respect to Ron Francis and everyone else, the most important trade in Penguins history was Paul Coffey coming to Pittsburgh. Changed everything. Gave Mario life, someone to play with. There will never be a bigger trade than that for the Penguins.
Well,
Watching him go up the ice was just, oh my God,
magical.
just incredible. Just incredible. I love the doctor.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's get to a break here, but coming up, we have a couple things. We have some feedback from the fans. You guys send in some questions. We're going to talk about our favorite obscure player from Penguin history. And then got to hear about, Josh, your experience with Sierra and Russell Wilson after the game last night. Josh is rubbing shoulders with the famous people in the world, and he's come down to earth back with us here. So we'll get right back to that as we get back into segment number 3 of 2 for Talking. All right, welcome back in, and as I alluded to, the Sierra and Russell Wilson. Do you want to get into that first? Or do you want to get into obscure player? Because I feel like we could go for a long time on obscure players.
Yeah,
Well,
we might as
let's
well
talk
hit.
a little Steelers. Let's talk some Steelers.
Yeah.
So yeah, Russell, I will say this for Russell Wilson. The guy, he knows good PR. He's been like at every Penguins game. He was at the NCAA basketball games wearing his Steelers windbreaker and stuff. So last night after the game, myself and a couple of other members of the media were walking toward the Penguins locker room, and I said, "Oh, that guy looks familiar. Oh, it's Russ." So here comes Russell Wilson and Sierra, and they're like flanked by a phalanx of bodyguards and like massive people in their posse. This was not a posse you wanted to mess with. I mean, these were large people, and they were walking by, and Sierra was wearing sunglasses, so I couldn't tell about her reaction. But I looked, I said, "Hey, I like your Wu-Tang shirt," because I didn't know what else to say. I'm like, "Yeah, nice Wu-Tang shirt." Everyone else has like a Steelers or Penguin shirt on. She's got the Wu-Tang shirt on. But they looked like royalty walking through the concourse. So then we we walk around the corner to the locker room, and there's Troy Polamalu just standing there by himself, and he spoke with the media for just a second, just some small talk, and he explained that unlike Russ, he does not need an entourage. It was just Troy by himself, and Joe, you'll be happy to know Troy was wearing a number 66 jersey at the Penguin game, which is just perfect because Troy Polamalu loves the Penguins. When he played for the Steelers, he was at the Igloo and a PPG all the time for hockey games. He always said he didn't like watching football. He didn't really like the sport, even though he played it. Loved watching hockey.
That's
awesome.
fantastic. Oh, Palomalu, but when men still roam the earth, there's something about the NFL when him and James Harrison played Ray Lewis and Ed Reed.
Yes.
And that was the end. That to me, that was the last time it was still men playing football.
That's right.
Steelers Ravens. It doesn't get better than that. Big Ben just taking an ass beating, throwing touchdowns. I just Steelers Ravens, man. It's the best.
I was there at the AFC Championship game in 2008. I thought somebody was going to die in that game. I mean, that was probably the last truly violent.
I think Willis McGahee did die in that game.
He almost did. Brian Clark almost took care of.
I mean, that's like
both of them. Yeah.
I know that that was like the most ruthless hit I've ever seen somebody lay on someone else. Like, and,
no. The most ruthless hit ever was James Harrison on the Cleveland quarterback. Remember the year that he kept getting fined? That was like
every week he was getting fined.
Colt McCoy.
That was like PlayStation. Like you knew he was going to get killed, but you didn't think he was going to get killed like that. He just got blown up.
Oh yeah, it was a slightly different sport then. But I gotta say, there's a buzz in Pittsburgh for the Steelers just with the quarterback change with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I haven't felt this kind of buzz for the Steelers in a little while. So I feel like Pittsburgh sports is back all of a sudden. You know.
Well, I'm totally down. I was totally like, with the Kenny stuff, and I do my Kenny joke. I'm glad he's going to Philly and I can shop at his favorite store. Wow. But I was just happy to give, although I did like Rudolph. I thought he saved Christmas. He saved the most important, the over/under bet. When we had 7 wins and the over is 8.5, and we're playing 2 and 10 teams, who would think in 4 days would be behind the 8 ball on that bet? I mean, God bless you, Mason Rudolph. But I'm happier thinking. But I think the even bigger key is getting Queen from Baltimore. That guy's a badass. I mean, he turns our defense all around. We didn't have a middle linebacker before that was any good.
It remains to be
okay this year. But
it remains to be seen. But it feels like a James Ferrier level, like mid-career move, pulling somebody, but pulling him from a division rival like that. I think that changes everything.
No, I mean, these aren't your granddaddy Steelers anymore. The way that Omar Khan's doing business, so we're not used
to artist.
We're not used to the wheeling and dealing, but I think it's a good thing for the Steelers. And listen, they're always going to be relevant. They're the Steelers, and Tomlin. I think I've heard the rumor he's never had a losing season, but this team feels a little different. Like there's some real talent on this team. So between this and the Penguins making a playoff push and our Bucks being 11-5, I mean, I don't know what's going on right now, but we were due for a break. It's been a rough couple of years for the very spoiled fan base here.
How about the Atlantic 10 champion Duquesne Dukes?
Yes.
The Dukes.
By the way, the Dukes were at the Penguins game against Detroit the other night, and they got a real nice ovation. They showed them in a luxury box, and then LeBron James sent a 90-second video talking to the Dukes that they showed on the big screen. So it was quite a moment.
Oh, that's fantastic. I do want to push back on the James Ferrier point, though. James Ferrier is a badass to me, but I mean, Queen is legitimately a badass NFL wise. Ferrier was more like a smart guy to do the position.
Yeah.
I mean, Queen will take somebody. He's a bad man.
Yeah, no, I just mean in terms of level of play at the linebacker position.
Oh yeah. I'm just saying, like, Queen is an intimidating guy, which I think they need in the middle.
In Baltimore is the fan base. I followed him immediately on Twitter because I see him fighting with the fans. And I'm like, keep bringing it on, right? Like the Ravens fans are just like egging him on. I'm like, this guy might end up like killing somebody whenever we play them.
Yeah. No, I love the signing. He's a really good player. They haven't had a good player at that position really since Ryan Shazier, I don't think. An impactful player And you have to have one when you're in this division with Cleveland and Baltimore, especially. Those teams are going to run the ball. You have to have a presence in the middle of the field against Nick Chubb or against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens running attack. So I think it's important that they got somebody like him. And I'll say this: I'm critical of Tomlin sometimes. I admit that, but I had to notice this at Queen's press conference. He was asked, why'd you come to Pittsburgh? He pointed right at Mike Tomlin. He said, I want to play for that guy. And that got my attention. Tomlin is a beloved guy in the NFL among players. That's a real advantage the Steelers have, I think. That guys want to play here because of him. And in Queen, they got a really good a really good player. And on paper, guys, this defense, it looks like Peasy Jr. is really going to emerge as maybe a shutdown corner. They should be really good on paper. We'll see if they are when the real games begin, but it's going to be interesting with all the talent that they have.
When I think that what really spoke volumes to me was seeing the veteran players recruit Russell Wilson. And like, okay, they all realize maybe like they're inside that locker room, they know. I mean, there was a couple, Josh, you mentioned there were some people, a couple birdies mentioned that before Mason Rudolph got into a game, they'd be walking into the facility and Deontay and George Pickens were doing taking reps with Mason Rudolph because they knew, all right, Kenny's not the guy. This isn't going to work here. If we just get a guy, we have a great team. And they were willing to go with Mason with nothing against Mason, but he's not on Russell Wilson's level.
Right.
And I thought that spoke volumes to where the team could be. Once 2024 rolls around.
I have a couple quick points. Just two on Kenny. One is he is a stat which you guys might know the exact. So he is one stat where he is dead last in all of football. Since they invented the forward pass, Sammy Baugh,
it's like the lowest touchdown percentage.
Touchdown passes to throw.
It's not
There's
like
guys that threw the ball
dead
with two
last.
hands.
Yeah, the ball was white. They were face masks. So that one, and then when they said, "Hey, what'd you learn on the bench?" When he goes, "Nothing." I mean, you weren't raised right, or what? You weren't taught to speak in public. That just got me the wrong way. So good riddance. But I've always defended Tomlin. I thought that Tomlin's, when he went through all the Black Lives Matter and kneeling for the flag, I thought he handled. For our organization, our franchise, our city, I thought he handled everything with such class that I'm proud that he's my football coach. And I love that man Monday through Saturday night. Sunday,
but then if there's a challenge,
I don't know what he's doing, but Lord. I still love him, and if he's still over 500, okay, I'll take him. Right. I do think maybe find a better coach, but I'll never be mad at Tomlin. I think I just love them. I just love the guy. I just think he's a great guy.
My only issue with him, I just don't ever like his staff. And if you look at his staff, it's not always a very qualified group. Or that was Bill Cowher's greatest strength. He knew how to hire a staff. Bill Cowher's first staff in '92, it Dick LeBeau, Dom Capers, and Marvin Lewis on his defensive staff. For God's sake, that guy knew how to hire a staff. Tomlin. I don't know if it's Tomlin. I don't know if it's the Rooneys maybe not wanting to spend the money on assistants and thus not getting the best ones. That's always my issue with him. I think he's a great coach during the week. Listen, he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's going to be in Canton someday.
Yes.
And obviously, he is universally loved in the National Football League. And like I said, guys want to play for him. You can't say that Bill Belichick might be the best coach ever. Nobody wanted to go play for him in New England.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Tomlin, people want to play for him. And in an era when guys can pick their team, there's no question that makes a difference.
Yeah. Now, my thing with Tomlin, and this gets back to where I love him every time except Sunday at 1 or Monday at 9, whatever. I just understand he is in charge. Can't he just throw a headset, grab someone by the neck, and say, "When it's 3rd and 8, I don't want to see I don't want to see the ball going thrown 4 yards." When I never want to see that screen pass that's not set up ever again. There's just 3 or 4 things I just want him to kick someone's ass over. That's just it. Which I just where I just think, what is he doing? He almost, I hate to say it, like the Mike Johnson look of like, what's going on? What's
The
going
myth.
on? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how can you just throw the ball 4 yards when it's 3rd and 8? You know, that's all. Whoever's job that is, that's what has to be rectified next year.
That's our third Mike Johnson reference in
Oh,
this inaugural episode of this podcast.
He's my LinkedIn friend.
And by
He's
the
my
way,
friend on LinkedIn. And every time he gets a job, I always, congratulations, Mike. I'm glad you're where you're at.
he's the nicest guy in the world. I saw him in Nashville at the draft last year, and I figured he didn't even remember who I was. Like he wasn't around that long. He shakes my hand and goes, "Josh Yohe, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, geez, hey, coach, how are you?" Nicest guy in the world. It's a shame it didn't work out, but he really wasn't cut for this job, was he?
my favorite was just every time they cut to him after the other team scored, he just had this miffed look, like he was just like, how did somebody score on it? Like, I don't understand. And I was just like, boy, oh boy, like I can remember Madden. I felt like Madden was going to jump off a bridge when he was talking about like Mike Johnston like ruining this team. I was like, it talk about juxtaposing, like you go from Mike Johnston, who you feel like wouldn't even yell at you if you screwed up his breakfast. He wouldn't even like he'd just politely eat it and just be like, whatever, it's fine. But Mike then you get Sully come in, and he's the alpha dog that's just gonna kick everything over, and he's like the dad at the dinner table where you're like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna talk during dinner tonight because dad's here, and he might be pretty pissed.
It's funny. I like Mike Sullivan a lot, but he does have a presence about him. He's not the kind of guy you want to make angry. He has that great coaching presence that I think most of the great ones have. That there's a respect that's commanded there that other coaches don't have.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. And Josh, you know way more than me about this because you're right there. I mean, before 16 and 17, I mean, there was a lot of whining and a lot of bitching coming from the big three.
Yeah.
And as soon as Sullivan walked in that door, like that all ended. Remember when Sid was, I mean, and rightly so, kind of getting criticized for his demeanor on the ice and off the ice a little bit, on the bench, and that ended. Those guys never complain anymore. I mean, a little bit now that they have 2 more cups under their belt, but I mean, for a while, it was like Sullivan that he was in charge. It was an amazing turnaround.
I believe the phrase that he always used was "just play." Said, "Stop complaining, stop the stuff after the whistles, just play." And it worked. And I still remember Sid telling me about when he was young and he played against the Red Wings in 2008 and 2009, how much he learned from those Red Wings teams. And he said one thing was, he said, I always wanted to talk. I always wanted to talk shit with those guys. And like Lidstrom would just look at me and smile and skate back to the bench. He said, you couldn't get any of them to even say a word to you. They wouldn't even acknowledge you. He said, it would drive me nuts. But then he said, years later, I actually grew to appreciate what they were doing and how they just focused on themselves. And the Penguins, certainly, I think they learned a lot, the big guys from that series, and years later they finally put it into action.
So we had some input from the fans, our a couple questions submitted, and the one that I know Joe and I both jumped on immediately was somebody wanted to know who our favorite obscure Penguin player would be. And I don't know if he's necessarily obscure, but I'll just start it off with saying I was a big fan of Yuri Slager. I liked
the original 71.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. I mean, his enthusiasm, I can still remember one goal he scored and then jumping into the glass at Mellon Arena. And I was a big fan of his game. Obviously, I was younger, so I probably didn't really notice if he was that good of a defenseman, to be honest. But but yeah, that's mine. But Josh, Joe, what do you guys got?
Oh boy,
I thought of mine already, so I'll let Josh think first. Let's you have one right now, Josh. Go ahead.
yeah, I always go back to the early '90s Penguins. That'll always be my team, and mainly because he had the coolest name ever. My favorite obscure Penguin from back then was number 14, Jacques Callender, who actually scored a big goal in the '92 playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, on the Muskegon line.
Oh, absolutely.
He put up huge minor league numbers, but when your name's Jacques Callender, that's just so cool. I can't help it. So I was always a Jacques fan.
My obscure guy I loved, and I still love him. Yarko Ruutu.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he came. He was kind of he was one of Shiro's one of his first guys he brought in to bring. In those days, you needed to have a lot more sandpaper than you do now. And Yarko had the sandpaper. He was he wasn't a cheap shot you, but he'd fight you, which I always respected. And had maybe
too, by the way.
He was a shootout
Yeah.
expert. And right when the tide kind of turned from the Dick Harmstrom, then we win the lottery, then Sid, and then then Ziggy Palfy disappears, and then Lemieux retires again, and it's Sid. And then Gino gets hurt in camp from Leclerc. Then he comes back. And just when his season started to look like we got something going on, it was the day after Thanksgiving in Ottawa. Yarko Ruutu scores the shootout winner, and I'm like, this team's going places. I love me some Yarko Ruutu.
I can still remember Ruutu, the first game of that season. For those that I don't know, I obviously haven't mentioned on the podcast before, but when we did Spaces before, I used to be in college. I was an usher at the arena, and I would usher my brother's section, and it was the opening game against Philly that season. And like during warm-ups, like I was about to like piss myself. I was so excited. Like, here we go, we actually have a shot again. And I'll never forget the first shift that Ruutu in the third line had, and they just were hammering people on the Flyers. And I forget who the first line for the Flyers was, but they were just like beating the piss out of them. They got nothing done. They kept them in the Flyers end the whole time. And then they went back to the bench, and Sid hopped over, and had a good shot against like the second or third line. And I looked at my brother. I was like, I forgot that's what a third line is for. Like, because until 2006-07, there was a 5-year gap where we didn't really have a third line that did what you were supposed. We had the Rico Fadas of the world, and everybody.
We have a first line for those 4 years.
Oh, I know. Yeah, geez. So it was. It was. I love the Ruutu reference, because that was like that was the line of demarcation in the Sid era for me, where I was like, oh my god, we have a hockey team. Like, this is.
I love it. That game, I'll never forget that game. That game just changed. It was like the beginning of like, oh, we're going to win some games now. Like, okay, we got a team together.
And if anybody doesn't remember George Larac, he was only here for, rough, like a large cup of coffee. Yeah. Year and a half, but him and this is an old era. You guys don't understand it, you young folk. But yeah, George Larac and what's his name, Donald Brashear, squaring off at the opening drop that everybody knew was going to happen, and that was a different era, a different time.
George never lost a fight in Pittsburgh, as I recall. I don't think he ever lost many fights. Period. That guy. So.
No, and he fight left-handed on purpose, so I think he would try to use his right hand to pin the other guy's arm down.
He would do that sometimes. He was a man, and also like the nicest guy, like a very gentle giant. But
I was on the roast of Shane Doan in Phoenix, Arizona. We roasted Doner, and on the dais was George Larac.
Oh.
And Larac had some writers write for him. He didn't like any of those jokes. He went back to the room and wrote his own set. He killed. Nicest guy. He's a vegetarian now. He's the nicest guy. I love some. I mean, I remember getting George Larac. I remember getting every goon we got. I remember the day we got him. But George was a great man. Just a really, really great guy. Big smile. Just kill to have him on the team right about now.
Goons are always the nicest people. Jay Caulfield's the nicest man you'll ever meet in your life. He truly is. It's funny how that works with the.
You want to know the way it is. I thought that Jay Caulfield would have known this story. But so for people that don't know, I have a background working in the movie industry, and anything that's filmed in Pittsburgh, every Pittsburgh crew person knows all the stories. So obviously, Sudden Death, filmed in Pittsburgh. And I heard the story over and over again that Jay Caulfield was walking through the locker room with his shirt off, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, who had to have a little bit of airbrushing to make his muscles look a little bit better than they were, he told the director, he said, that guy cannot walk around without a shirt on. And so that I heard that story many times. I'm like, Jay has to have known this. So then I meet Jay like a handful of years later, and I go, hey, just want to know, did you know that Jean-Claude Van Damme said that? And he goes, really? He's like, I didn't know that. I said, no, I swear to God. He's like, I remember hearing something. But he's like, really? I said, yeah, no, apparently you were so jacked that Jean-Claude Van Damme said, make that guy wear a shirt. He's making me look bad. So Jay Caulfield, he could be an action star if he wanted.
I'll
Oh,
tell you my Jay Caulfield story, and then on another episode when we have to do summer programming. I got a good Jay Caulfield story.
Yeah. Well, hey, I guess let's wrap it up here for the first one. Hopefully this isn't the only one that we have while the Penguins are still playing and active. It'd be nice to be talking playoffs next week. But just for you guys listening, we're gonna do this once a week. We're gonna, in the off season, there's plenty to cover. I mean, as Josh and Joe have both said, who they write hockey through the summer. There's really only a handful of weeks where there's nothing going on. And yeah, we'll see where this goes. Hopefully, we can get some special guests on and kind of take this thing. We're gonna go 1 week at a time. But if you ever want to send in anything, it's 2fortalking podcast@gmail.com. That's a number 2 for talking at podcast@gmail.com. Send your questions there. Follow us on Twitter, anything like that. Josh had mentioned that maybe relationship advice would be something we could get into. So as he pointed out that he outkicked his coverage whenever he landed his girlfriend, so much so that the Penguins give him a hard time about it. So if you ever want to get terrible dating advice, Josh will help you out there. I'm sure Joe has a story or two that he could help out.
Yeah, I've had a few onside kicks.
No, I'm an open book, so I'm sure we'll get into great details about my personal life, my child custody hearing performance, whatever people want to hear about. I'm not shy. I have many great tales to tell.
Yeah, I want to hear if you want to hear what it's like to raise children across the border, that Josh will give you that story. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys doing this. This was awesome, and appreciate everybody listening. And we will talk to you guys next time.